If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this. People, what was your creepiest glitch in the Matrix, time loop, portal, or unexplained experience that left you baffled? 2 nights ago, my girlfriend and I were driving from Arcata, California, to Eureka, California, a 15-minute drive that I have done hundreds of times. It was a cold and icy rainstorm after having unusually warm weather for weeks. At roughly 10:57 p.m., we merged onto the freeway in Arcata. My girlfriend put on a 3-minute song on Spotify, and I merged into the left lane of the freeway to pass a slow driver. Then, suddenly, we are entering Eureka. The song is still playing. I noticed something was wrong right away and got freaked out. There's no way anyone can cover the distance we covered in a car in less than 3 minutes. Also, I was driving about 55 miles per hour because of the super low visibility. I cried a little bit because I'm usually skeptic about this kind of thing, and it challenged everything I believed. I pulled over at a gas station in Eureka to call my sister and tell her. My phone says that was at exactly 11:02 p.m. so in 5 minutes I went from entering the freeway in a different town to being parked at a gas station 8.2 miles away. I don't think I would have noticed if it wasn't for the song still playing. My girlfriend didn't notice, but when I pointed out to her that the song was still on and showed her what time it was on the clock, then she was pretty shook too. We talked about it for hours afterward. Walking through a ferry portal. I understand that this topic has been brought up many times, but I feel like I want to get this off of my chest. I am no stranger to paranormal activity, but I want to know if anyone has felt the same before seeing the portal. I would always go by the water to express my emotions alone because if I were home, things would have gone sideways. There was a park that was 22 minutes walk from the condo I lived in during high school. This park had 2 waterfalls that I would go by to just numb myself by listening to the running water. Sometimes I would write, but other times I would meditate to be silent with my thoughts. It had rained the day before, and I had always admired how brightly colored everything was. I had felt a strange pull to the park that day, and I decided to go sit in the waterfall, seeing how it was a nice summer day. I had been going through some family things that led me back to the park because it was the only place that I had gotten peace. Normally I would take the route where I would walk up an incline to get to the park, but I chose to take the entrance that had the sidewalk on it. As I got to the path with the wooden area, everything seemed fine. Looking back on it, I'd say that there was an actual low pressure that came from me taking that path. Ignoring this, I continue on. There is a clearing in 2 areas of the park, one for bird watching and the other a dog park. I pass the bird watching area and notice the doe grazing with their head kind of on a swivel, but they don't seem too bothered. I continue walking and get to the next wooded area. I was alone. There was nobody with me and nobody surrounding me on the other trails. The water from the creek grabs my attention, and I go towards it. I have done this many times before, so it did not seem out of place. Kneeling down, I am looking at the water as it flows, and I sense that I want to move on to the next thing. As I return to the path, I start to notice that there is a very distinctive arch made by 2 young trees. They were intertwined so tightly that they wouldn't come apart. I am not sure if I should walk through this, but my body feels uneasy and also curious. Could someone have made this in the split second that I was looking at the water? I encouraged myself to go through because, at the time, I saw no harm in it. I looked back as I entered, and everything seemed normal. I get to the waterfall to have my alone time, and I go back the same way I came, only to see the 2 young trees unraveled and back to their original position with no indication of them being intertwined. I stated that prior to this event I was feeling upset/depressed. Could my energy have given the Fae enough energy to create a temporary portal, or am I crazy? Visited my hometown after 15 years. I went directly to my childhood friend's home. It was locked. I thought he was out or something, but as soon as I turned, he was standing right behind me. We hugged, bro, time ensued. He asked me to come inside after he unlocked the door. His house was spooky. Things were broken, furniture was covered and dusty. I said, "What's up with this shit?" He told me he didn't have time for it as he was busy. I didn't care really. Just wanted to catch up on all the shit from our childhood. We talked about everything from childhood to adulthood. After a few hours, I told him I'd be going to my cousin's home to stay the night. He insisted that I stay the night, but I didn't really want to spend it in the house as it was too spooky. So, he told me to come back here tomorrow, and I said definitely I will. Bid him goodbye. I went to my cousin's house. A lovely couple with 2 kids. At dinner, I told them about my friend and his house. They looked at me with terror and disbelief. My cousin said something like "Don't duck with us," and I was surprised as to why he would say that. They told me that the friend had died in a car accident 10 years ago. His parents and family had moved somewhere else, and the house has been locked since. I have no idea what the duck has happened. I was shitting bricks. To this day, I don't know if it was a dream or reality. But, still, I'm just glad that my friend, or ghost, or my imagination, caught up with me. Hey everyone. I've been lurking here for a while and have finally decided to share my own creepy experience. This happened a few months ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. It was a Friday night, and I was home alone. My parents were out of town, and my little sister was at a sleepover. Around midnight, I decided to watch some horror movies, because, why not? Halfway through the movie, I heard this weird noise coming from the basement. It sounded like someone was whispering, but very faintly. Being the curious idiot I am, I grabbed my phone and headed down to check it out. As I descended the stairs, the whispering got louder and more distinct. It was like a conversation, but I couldn't make out any words. I was about to turn on the light when I noticed a faint glow coming from the far corner of the basement. I walked towards it, my heart pounding, and saw a freaking old, dusty mirror propped up against the wall. The glow seemed to be coming from the mirror itself. I got closer and saw my reflection, but something was off. My reflection was smiling at me, but I definitely wasn't smiling. I freaked out and backed away, but my reflection just kept smiling, its eyes following me as I moved. I noped out of there, ran back upstairs, and locked myself in my room. I barely slept that night, and the next morning, the mirror was gone. I mean, it just disappeared. No one in my family ever knew we had a mirror like that. I still don't know what happened that night. Was it a ghost? A glitch in the Matrix? Am I just losing my mind? If anyone has any ideas or similar experiences, please let me know. I'm genuinely freaked out. The ghost that altered time and space dimensions. About 9 years ago, when the paranormal activity in our home was at its peak, my brother enjoyed something he called ghost hunting. He would hang out in the unfinished section of the basement with both connecting doors closed and the lights off. He would bring random items and speak to whatever was back there in an attempt to experience something. I was too nervous to join him, but one time I did. What happened that day resulted in neither of us stepping foot in there again, and it put an abrupt end to his game. It was in the middle of the day, and sunlight was coming through the two tiny windows. We had positioned ourselves in the center of the room, and he began asking questions. I was standing in front of my brother, looking around nervously. For some reason, it got incredibly silent. I began feeling very uncomfortable, so I turned around but realized he was not behind me anymore. Confused, I called out his name several times and started searching, but he was nowhere to be seen. I hadn't heard him leave, nor had I heard a door open or close. The light in the basement had changed, it was so strange. Every dust particle was frozen in the air like time itself had stopped. Seriously freaked out. I squatted down on the concrete floor and just rocked back and forth. It felt like I had been crouched for hours. Suddenly I felt someone touch my shoulder, and when I spun around, it was my brother. He looked very confused and asked what I was doing. I explained what happened, and he just said, "What do you mean? I've been here the whole time." Whatever we contacted that day was able to separate us somehow. It still spooks us, and I'll never know what really happened. I drove through a town that didn't exist. Several years ago, I was driving to my parents' house for the Christmas holidays. Normally, I would have left a day early. We live in different states, but I had to work overtime, so I got a late start. Since I needed to be there the next day, I decided to search for a shortcut. Searching my phone, I found a route that I wasn't familiar with but decided to take my chances anyway. According to my GPS though, the exit for the road I would be traveling on was about 2 miles away. After driving for about 10 minutes, I found myself exiting onto Route 50, which, according to my GPS, would take me the rest of the way to my parents' house. An hour had passed, and I noticed there was not one single car on the road, except for me. The road was located in a very rural area of the state, so I figured that was the reason for the absence of cars. Even the road itself was bumpy and full of potholes, so people probably avoided it for these reasons too. Anyway, the road was surrounded by forest on both sides, and I noticed there were no light posts either, making it very dark. As I continued to drive while listening to Christmas songs on the radio, I began to feel sleepy, nearly crashing my car into a ditch, jolting me wide awake. Using my phone as a light source, I got out of my car to access the damage and noticed a sign that read Pottsville, 1 mile. Finding no visible damage to my car or the sign, I decided to continue driving. I noticed though that I was beginning to feel hungry, and remembering the sign for Pottsville, I decided I would have a bite there since I had to drive through the town anyway. Upon entering Pottsville, it appeared normal enough, but the further I drove into town, the more I began to notice something was off. The buildings themselves appeared to be void of color, like something straight out of an old black and white movie, but even stranger though were the people. The people, who, I swear, were walking backwards, almost like somebody rewinding a movie. On top of that, they were flickering in and out, reminding me of a computer glitch. These people seemed to be oblivious to me as I continued staring at them, nearly running a red light in the process. I instantly hit my brakes, causing my car to come to a screeching halt. Things got even weirder. As soon as I hit my brakes, everybody turned their heads toward me, all the while flickering as they stood there staring at me. Red light or not, that was my cue to get the hell out of this town. As I sped off, I looked into my rearview window and saw that the people were still standing there unmoving as they watched me leave town. When I passed the leaving Pottsville sign, there were several police officers. They were flickering too, waiting for me as they barricaded the road. Not wanting to wait around, I quickly drove through the barricade, not looking back once. It was around 3 in the morning when I finally made it to my parents' house, luckily unscathed with no damage to my car either. The following year, I decided to take the same route, despite my ordeal, and to my surprise, there was no town, no sign of people, nothing, almost like the town never existed. To add to the mystery, the road that led into town was now a dead end. I don't care if nobody believes me or not because I know what I experienced was real. Anyway, here's a warning to you. If you're ever driving down Route 50 and happen to stumble upon the town of Pottsville, avoid it at all costs, or you might not be able to escape so easily like me. My best friend, I'll call her Gray, and I wanted to hang out, so we decided to go for a hike. I chose a reservation I had been to multiple times before so that we could still have hope of navigating through the long trails in case we got lost. In hindsight, it was a pretty weird decision to go hiking considering it was mid-February in New England and it was still pretty cold out. This day in particular was especially foggy and colder than we had expected. We took the bus to the northern entrance of the reservation and headed towards the southern entrance, about a 4.5-hour trail. This was Gray's first time visiting the reservation, so she was attempting to take photos along the way. I say attempting because whenever she took her phone out, she would manage to snap a few photos before her phone would shut off and restart because of the cold. My phone wouldn't even turn on at all. Nearing the end of the trail, we come across an extremely picturesque setting. A large, barren tree with a wooden swing attached to the largest branch on the edge of a frozen, foggy pond. The first person we saw since we arrived was a man swinging a little girl, probably around 4 years old, wearing a bright pink jacket. We get closer, and Gray manages to take a handful of photos before her phone repeats the cycle of death. She tells me that she wants to swing after they leave, so we wait patiently, giving them enough space not to ruin their little moment. Not even 10 minutes into waiting, we notice that the man has stopped pushing the little girl and instead is just standing there, staring straight at us without any expression on his face. Gray and I turn around to avoid the creepy eye contact for a few seconds, and when we turn back around, the man is coming straight at us on an all-black unicycle. Gray screams, and right before he crashes into us, he makes a sharp turn straight into the woods. I will never forget how creepy this man's face was. He had absolutely no emotion at all and literally looked pale as a ghost, almost green in the face. We look back at the little girl to see her struggling to run after him, eventually disappearing into the woods as well. Gray and I debated on going after the little girl for a while but decided not to since neither of our phones were turning on and we still had about half an hour to reach the southern exit of the reservation. I start pushing Gray on the swing, and as we're trying to dissect what just happened and where this man got a unicycle from, something across the pond catches my attention. I can barely see it through the fog, but quickly realize from the bright pink color that the little girl was watching us from between the trees. What makes this even crazier is that the man and the little girl disappeared into the woods heading east, and the other side of the pond was west of where Gray and I were. This little girl did not nearly have enough time to have gone all the way around us without either of us noticing. I point it out to Gray, and she immediately jumps off the swing, and we both start running to the exit without exchanging a word until we're in the clear. We walked about another 45 minutes until we reached civilization again and found a place to eat. We go in, and Gray plugs her phone into an outlet so that it can turn back on, and we look through all the photos. All of the photos from the day are there except the last 4 photos she took of the man and the little girl. In their place were just plain, black thumbnails with an error message that read "file not found" when she would try to view them. To this day, we cannot make sense of that situation. I went back to that reservation several times afterwards and tried avoiding that pond at all costs. The one time I did revisit the pond area was because of a dare with a group of friends, only to discover something equally strange. It was around 9 p.m. and completely dark, and there was a group of about 20 to 30 people having a picnic in what looked like colonial-era clothing. We creeped on them for a few minutes and decided to head back before they noticed us. Maybe it was Amish group bonding, I don't know, but the fact that they were having a picnic without any sort of lights, or lanterns, in the middle of the woods was pretty weird. My husband and I share a bedroom in the attic. I just happened to be looking in the right direction, and I saw 4/5 branches of lightning about 5 inches long just come out of the roof rafter. I also heard it, and my husband also heard it, but he didn't see it. There are no outlets anywhere in this area. Earlier in the day we had thunderstorms. I love a thunderstorm and always record them, and with this particular storm I noticed very strange sounds during the storm. It sounded like static interference, very noticeable and strange, as I had never heard these sounds in any other of the many thunderstorm videos I had ever recorded. After this storm it cleared up, and about 8 hours after these sounds in the video is when the lightning branches came out of the roof rafter. Prior to this, I knew nothing about portals, but something in my mind told me right after that it was a portal. Even though the storm had stopped hours before this happened, I checked the roof the next day, and there were no marks whatsoever. The only thing I can think of is that there was a massive amount of energy in the atmosphere in this particular area. Remember the static interference sounds I picked up during the recording of the storm, and all that energy produced a portal. If anyone has had a similar experience or can possibly explain this, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm sharing this here, hoping that maybe you guys can help me explain it. I don't think it was supernatural, but it was strange enough that it has disturbed my understanding of reality in a very small but definite way. Perhaps there's an answer to what I observed, and maybe the answer is stranger than anything I can imagine. Here's what happened. Around 1999, when gas was 99 cents a gallon, I would take the long drive from Glendale, Oz, to Tempe and visit friends quite often. At around 9 p.m., my buddy Chris and I stopped to get gas at the corner station before heading out to the freeway. It was in June, and the temperature was probably 90+F and the sun was down. We pulled into the spot. I opened my gas cap and started pumping gas. I stooped approximately 4 feet from the pump and was standing close but not touching my car, a 1997 Mitsubishi Eclipse. Chris was standing on my side, the driver's side, and was about 4 feet from me. The place was very well lit, like most gas stations, and it was self-serve. Chris and I were talking about something when, directly between us, a portal opened up for 1 second and then closed. I will describe it in the most detailed way I can. It was a thin line, perhaps 1.5 feet long, that had no perceptible width. It sparkled with an intensely bright white light and was perfectly aligned vertically. The sparkles were strange in that they were not flashes, nor were they electrical in behavior. The intensity was like viewing a laser in the dark and dropping bits of glitter through the beam, except this laser was white and the glitter was infinitely small. Another odd property of this line was that the bits of white light seemed to travel downward in one direction, and where they stopped in mid-air was very abrupt. There was no phasing in or out. Imagine taking an X-Acto knife to reality. It started and stopped without any warning. At first we both said, "Holy shit, did you see that?" And before I allowed Chris to say anything else, my skeptical inquirer training set in. "What did you see?" I asked him. I wanted to hear him tell me the event without me biasing his perception of it. "That white sparkle. What did it look like?" "It just started and stopped, like glitter or something." "Where was it?" He pointed to the same place. "I witnessed it too." We spent a couple minutes searching the area. At first I looked above us, and we waved our hands around to see if there were any spider webs. I inspected the roof of the gas station and saw a few moths, but they were nearer the lamps, about 20 up, than to us. The weather was clear, with almost no humidity. Chris and I drove to Tempe, talking about this thing the whole trip. I was surprised it happened at a gas station because if it were electrical, it might have been dangerous, but Chris and I both agreed it looked nothing like electricity or anything else we had ever seen. I have searched for an explanation and still do so every once in a while. I have ruled out St. Elmo's fire, ball lighting, ferries, etc. I've pondered if some kind of insect could produce something like this in a kind of web or such, but the intense light that came from the object is difficult to imagine. A laser beam seems to be the best idea, but a white one? And what would allow it to start and stop mid-air? In junior high, my brother and I went to a big empty field to hit golf balls. We were the only ones there. We'd take turns, one of us would hit 20 to 30 balls with a pitching wedge, 70 yards or so, and then we'd go collect them and switch. At one point I was hitting and talking to my brother, who was facing me, about 3 feet away. I noticed that the ball I was about to hit had a really hokey name, Pin Seeker, as opposed to the typical Titleist, Top Flight, etc., and I even made a joke about the name. Then I hit the ball, and it went about 70 yards and took a hop or two. Then we started talking again, and wham! A ball landed right between us. We both jumped back and looked around, but there was no one anywhere. We got the ball from where it ended up behind us, and it was the pin seeker I had just hit. We went out and got the rest of the balls, and the pin seeker wasn't there. We were so creeped out, we left and went home. Somehow that ball either went through a wormhole or went backwards in time because it landed exactly at the spot between us from where I had hit it. I presume if we had been looking out in the field, instead of facing each other and talking, we might have seen it literally reverse its flight and shoot up in the air and back toward us. Anyway, to this day, 40 years later, we refer to it as the golf ball incident. I saved my own life 25 years ago. I once had a weird dream where I was driving home and listening to some oldies. It was raining a bit, and the wind was quite heavy. After a while, I saw a heavily damaged car on the left side of the road. The driver must have hit a tree. I stopped my car to call the ambulance and to look for the driver. It was a woman in her mid-20s with short, curled blonde hair. She was unconscious, and there was some blood. She wasn't breathing, so I dragged her out of the car to give her first aid. After a while, I heard the sirens of the ambulance. I shortly looked in the direction of where the ambulance was coming and then back to the woman. She suddenly had her eyes wide open and a look of total terror in her face. The dream then ended there. Some weeks ago, we celebrated my 25th birthday. I got some awesome presents, but one was very special. My uncle made a photo collage of my family. He found them in an old box, as he mentioned. I already had some shots, so I decided to put them in the corner of my room with the other presents. When I was about to leave the room, the collage fell over, so I turned back to arrange it properly. While doing it, I glanced over the photos. I've never seen old pictures of my parents before, so I was quite curious after all. There was a wedding photo of my parents. I recognized my dad. He looked really sharp in his suit. Next to him was a lady who was Georgian and pregnant. It looked like she had some wounds and or scars at her arm and at her neck. Then it all kicked in. She was the woman I dragged out of the car to give first aid. My whole body trembled. I immediately ran to my dad to ask what happened back then. He told me she had a car accident 25 years ago. When the ambulance and police arrived, she lay on the street, and a man ran away from her body. The doctor told my dad if my mother didn't get first aid in that situation, she may have lost her unborn child because of a lack of oxygen. I was still trembling at this moment and could not get a single word out of my mouth. After some time had passed, I simply returned to my party guests. However, I no longer felt the urge to celebrate. It was also ducking weird. I think I just teleported in time and space. My mom yells at me, telling me that the dog wants to go for a walk. I check the time, 8:55. I take him out and can remember walking him 3/4 of the way. I remember everything that we saw, what he did, what I thought, etc. I remember being irritated and trying to figure out why. It's because I had left my phone at home. I had no phone to look at, I couldn't check the time or play music like I regularly do on our walks. I threw his dog bag in a public trash can. That's the last thing I can remember. I opened the door to my house very confused. I hung his leash up and instantly thought, how did I get here? I told my mom that I can't remember anything that just happened between the trash can and the door. It's like I just walked through time. I do not remember turning the corner. I do not remember walking up the driveway. In fact, I'm positive I didn't. I walked back to my room confused. Checked the time, on the same device I had checked beforehand, thinking maybe I'd passed out or been drugged. Maybe lots of time has passed? It was still 8:55. It takes way more than 60 seconds to walk my dog around the block. Please help, explain something. My grandma's house. I recently discovered this place, and hearing some of these stories made me realize that I truly have a story to tell. I think it counts as a glitch. If I'm wrong, my apologies. I always thought of it more like a ghost encounter, but I resist that idea because I need to see some credible evidence before I just decide something is real, etc. Anyways, my grandma lives in this huge house, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, hundreds of years old. My granddad's family built it, which is out in the middle of the mountains and the boonies. An hour from any real town. It's beautiful, but I have felt creeped out being alone in it my entire life, including as an adult, and the upstairs is by far the creepiest. I always feel like I'm going to spin around and see someone behind me. This was about 9-ish years ago because I was 25 and a new mom, so we had made the trip out to the home place so my grandma could spend some quality time with my baby. Bedtime comes, and I go to my usual guest room upstairs because it has a California king, which left enough room for me, safe bed sharing, and all of my stuff. At the bottom of the bed, I have my overnight bag and diaper bag in the bottom left-hand corner and more in the center. I have one of those small, plastic-wrapped bags of diapers and some wipes. The bag of diapers has a hole in it because I had just changed her before bed. The bed is so huge, and I'm about 5 feet 3 inches, so my feet don't even come close to any of it. Anyway, the blankets and sheets on this bed are tucked in military tight, and after trying to pull the bottom loose for a minute, I just gave up, so there's no way they could have pulled out on their own as I got under the covers. So my daughter is asleep beside me. I've just turned out the lights, and I'm looking at my phone a bit because I still feel a little jumpy and creeped out, as usual. It's in the middle of nowhere, so it's pitch black other than my phone, because there aren't street lights or other houses or even more than one car every few hours. I thought I heard something, but I wasn't sure, so I was laying there, phone down, extremely still, trying to hear it again when it happened. I hear the crinkle of the bag of diapers, just barely, and then a super loud thwack followed by quiet ruffling sounds. I immediately reach out and pull my daughter to my side, and I just freeze and strain for any sound at all for, honestly, like 10 minutes or longer. I'm totally petrified, and it's so dark. I keep blinking to see if my eyes are still open. Finally, after a long time, I hyped myself up to go for the light switch, which involves stepping out of the bed. I turn on the lights and everything seems normal, so I walk around the bed, and there are diapers and wipes everywhere. The bag of diapers is completely empty and in the far corner, every diaper is spread out like they exploded out of the bag, totally fanned out. Not evenly like they were placed, just like they went flying with some serious force. And the wipes are the same way. It was a small plastic wrap container, not the hard plastic box, which means you have to tediously remove each wipe as if from a tissue box, but here they are all over. A few clumped together, but most are separated. I am just completely flabbergasted. I check the blankets, but they're in just as tight as ever. The diaper bag and overnight bag are still perfectly in place and untouched. There's no way that I kicked my feet or moved them by bouncing or rolling over, because I was still not to wake my daughter, and in the morning I tried to kick the diapers off by kicking and moving and rolling around and nothing. And even if I somehow made them fall or even bounce up, nothing explains how every diaper looks like it was machine gunned out of a t-shirt cannon, much less whatever exploded all of the wipes out. I laid in bed, with the light on, until daylight, because I couldn't relax enough to sleep. I have told all my friends and family, and to this day I cannot figure out how it happened like that. I went to England to visit family when I turned 18, my first time back in 15 years. I was born there and raised in the US. One day while I was there, I decided to venture out on my own, and I took a trip to the shops by the ferry docks. After walking around for a bit, I took the ferry across the water to see the town my dad had grown up in. Again, after walking for a bit, I decided to head back. At this point I should mention that I was wearing black Doc Martens, black skinny jeans, a black long sleeve, a black knitted beanie with a poof on top, and a gray and black flannel, and had short bleached blonde hair and really intense makeup on. So I got on the ferry, sat down, and put my earbuds in. Towards the end of the ride, I looked up from my phone and saw a girl sitting across from me of the same age wearing brown Doc Martens, light denim skinny jeans, a white long sleeve, a colorful flannel, and a purple knitted beanie with a poof on top. She didn't have on any makeup, and her hair was my natural red color. The weirdest thing though was that we looked exactly alike, same face/height/build, and she noticed it as well. We locked eyes and looked each other up and down, and then we just stared at each other in silence for the remainder of the ride. As soon as the ferry stopped, we both stood up, and she disappeared into the crowd of people. I tried to follow her and looked for her throughout the crowd, and when I got off the ferry, I looked in every direction in which she could have gone, but she had just vanished. I have theories on what this could have been, but I'll never really be sure. I live in very rural southern Appalachia, and yesterday, I was going over to the next county to look at lawnmower. It's an area I'm very familiar with, although I haven't been there in over a year. While on the way, I came upon a town that has never been there before. Now there is a small community there, and it was by the same name, but this was a fully fledged small town. Had a couple red lights, a main street with probably 15 to 20 storefronts, everything. I was so taken aback I stopped in the middle of the road. After a few moments, a car behind me honked the horn, so I pulled into a parallel spot and got out. Now the small towns in my area are all the same, tiny, dingy, run down. Had a heyday in the 50s and 60s, but all have fallen into disrepair. Not this one. Everything was pristine and new looking. Swept sidewalks, shiny windows, and clean brick. The people I saw were dressed in modern clothes and had the same appearance that most people in the area have, healthy but weather-beaten and aged beyond their years. The vehicles I saw were fairly modern, new to 20 years old, nothing out of the ordinary. I walked into the little restaurant, Cream of the Crop Cafe, and it looked like every other little restaurant in the area. Booths and tables, a bar top with a register and the kitchen behind it, some cheesy James Dean and Marilyn Monroe pictures on the walls. I walked up to the girl at the counter and asked her where I was. She seemed puzzled, because I could tell so I don't know. So not a lot of people believe me with this story. And I'm not much of a believer in anything that can't be proven to me. But here's my weird-ass glitch/story. I was about 13, 14. I lived with my mom and dad, and I was in middle school at the time. I've never really had much of a relationship with my dad, as he's always gone to work or the bars because of his drinking problem and never home, so it's always been just me and my mom. My mom's side of the family is plagued by drug issues and heavy smoking. So my grandma, my mom's mom, had been diagnosed with COPD but continued to smoke even afterward and had a long downward spiral. Every day after school, my mom would take me to visit her mother. It went from the oxygen tank to nursing homes, to the hospital, and finally to in-home hospice. Every day after school I'd see her with my mom, and it was always so depressing to see my mom watch her own mother's demise and see the pain it put her through, as if being a middle schooler isn't depressing enough. So anyway, my grandma had a stroke at one point, which put her in the hospital, and she had gotten to where she couldn't talk but only groan, which was disturbing to see her only talk in groans. After a few days, this is when she went to hospice, where she was in an induced coma in her home along with my 2 uncles, 2 aunts, a nurse, and my mom and me. She was in the coma for about a week. This is where shit gets seriously weird. One night on a school night for me, my mom went to stay at my grandma's house along with my 2 uncles and 2 aunts and left me at home. I felt really alone, grim, depressed, and just overall ugly. I called my mom before I went to sleep because I couldn't stop thinking about all of it. I hated the pain. So anyway, I fell asleep as per usual, planning on waking up and taking the bus to school. Fell asleep at 10-11-ish, and I remember having this dream, like out of nowhere this silhouette of an old woman was down this hallway I was looking at and it had an aura around her, and then I remember physically feeling this heavy ducking pressure and energy in my chest causing me to groan and yell in my bed, which woke me up. I continued to moan and yell because of this weird energy in my chest and looked and saw the same silhouette in the corner of my room. I immediately thought of my grandma for some reason. I rubbed my eyes, and it was gone. This was at 3 a.m., I'll never forget the time, and so I called my mom until she answered because she was sleeping. I immediately asked, "Hey, is Grandma okay?" And my mom said she was fine. "Don't worry, just go back to sleep so I can go to school." I said okay, and not even a minute later I got a call back from her. Apparently my uncle walked in the room a few seconds after my mom got off the phone to give her the news that my grandma passed. I've never been one to believe in any godlike/spiritual-like things, so this was insane to me. I took it as a goodbye from my grandma before she moved on as her and I were close. The craziest thing I have ever experienced. About a week and a half ago, me, my manager, and another colleague of mine were driving around at 1 a.m. to try to find somewhere we could get some food at a drive-thru. Every 24-hour McDonald's appeared to be closed, so we ended up driving 30 minutes away to try and find somewhere that was open. Eventually we gave up and pulled up at a service station around 2 a.m. It was eerily quiet, and we weren't even sure if it was open due to COVID, but we got out to check anyway. We walked into the doors, and it was mostly shut apart from toilets, and a small shop with one lonely worker sat behind a till. All the fast food places were shut, lights off. We used the toilet, and my manager recalled that she'd actually been there before, and there was another part of the service station across a bridge that could be open, so we went off to search for it. We found the walkway connecting to the bridge up 2 flights of stairs. The bridge was covered with windows surrounding the outside, showing a view of the motorway beneath. My manager said that the bridge was giving her the creeps, and I had to agree. It was long and narrow and dimly lit, with nobody else around. We decided to run as fast as we could to the other side. Honestly, it was unsettling. We made our way down the stairs at the end and were met with dead silence. Once again, we were faced with closed restaurants and dim lighting. There wasn't a single other person around, and we were walking aimlessly around a large, unoccupied space, a feeling of unease settling in. We couldn't take much more of the creepiness, so we ran back up the stairs, back across the bridge, as fast as we could possibly manage. We caught our breath once we were back to the other side and commented on how strange the area had been. After that, we got snacks from the single open shop and walked back to the car to have a smoke. but the odd chilling feeling remained with us. We all agreed that we felt as though a lot of time had passed, despite the whole thing taking around 20 minutes only. The parking lot was empty, and the air felt off, like the pressure had shifted. That's the best way I can describe it. We went home after that and tried to sleep it off, but when we woke up, things still weren't the same. Since then, the world has felt off to all of us. Colors look different. Nothing feels normal or right. Things are the same and yet completely different. It's hard to describe, life just feels more like a dream, and we all have a sense of being there in our day-to-day lives but not being present. We struggle to connect our minds to our physical bodies, and we present in the moment. It sounds crazy, but it's been a very real experience for all three of us. We all agree that this started when we left the service station that night. Then the really weird thing happened tonight, and this is the moment I decided to hop on the internet and try and get some clarity. So far, Google has nothing for me. Anyway, tonight we were dealing with some pretty morbid stuff with a friend of ours that's suffering with her mental health badly. We left her with the police, and my manager, my colleague, and I set off driving home. We discussed that night at the service station again, noting that all the bad things that were happening with our friend and her mental health started after that. Other unpleasant events had followed as well, and we pondered the significance of our creepy adventure and the bad things that were happening now. I said, it's like since that night, nothing has been the same, and then the weird thing happened. We both started crying simultaneously, as if someone had turned a tap on for both of us. Water started leaking out of our eyes at exactly the same time, and we were so freaked. I felt a wave of sadness and emotion, but it wasn't enough to make me cry, and my colleague never cried. Ever. We're sure now more than ever that something happened that night, we just don't know what. We've joked about ending up in another dimension, and I don't normally believe anything like that. But this has me questioning because I'm honestly convinced that something isn't right and that we've encountered something that's changed all three of us. We just don't know what. Even as I write this, I feel often a tad tearful, I have no idea why. If anyone could shed some light on this, I'd be really appreciative. Thank you so much for listening. This happened about 10 years ago, when I was 17. I was in Tampa visiting my aunt and grandma. My aunt and grandma lived 2 turns off of a long, fairly main road, and I always remembered this odd-looking building about halfway down the road on the left. The architecture was super specific and was the only building for quite a ways on either side, about 3/4 mile from the first turn to get to their house. As a child, it always stood out to me as a reminder that we were just around the corner. One night I went to a concert about 1.5 to 2 hours away. My aunt let me borrow her car, and I had to pick up another girl along the way. She lived 20 minutes from my aunt's, so I took the freeway to get there. I picked her up, we went to the concert, then I drove her home. I can't remember the exact time of night, but it was late enough that very few cars were left on the roads. I believe sometime between 12 and 2 a.m. This girl lived what I would describe as the swampy suburbs. There were lots of family homes, but the roads weren't paved super well, there were no street lamps, no sidewalks, and it was windy and confusing. It was not a clearly laid out grid, and I absolutely need my GPS to guide me in and out. A couple minutes after I dropped her off and started my 20-minute journey back to my family's house, I noticed that my phone had only 2% left. I immediately started speeding to get out of the confusing windy roads of this neighborhood before I lost my GPS. My aunt called me to ask me where I was, and as I said, I can't talk, I only have 2%, my phone died. I was in a practically pitch black neighborhood with no sign of any main roads or any clear direction on how to get out. It felt like I was in a never-ending maze. I went down road after road, flipping U-turns in random dark driveways, hitting dead ends every other turn. I was screaming and panicking, hitting the steering wheel with my hands. I was so scared. But after 5 to 10 minutes of this, I had an insane sense of calm wash over me. In an instant, I knew it was all going to be okay and that God, I was a Christian at the time, no longer, would guide me home. I knew there was no way something terrible was going to happen to me, and that felt like a fact. It was bizarre, like my body knew something I didn't. The next turn I took, I was spit me out on a new road. I turned right and immediately noticed the weird building by my aunt's house, literally on the corner. I turned around in the parking lot and went back down the road to their house, putting the building back on my left. I was home less than 10 minutes after I had dropped the girl off and got back through the suburbs, when earlier that night it took me 20 minutes on the freeway. But here's the kicker. The following day, I was determined to find the street from which I had emerged the previous night, but to my surprise, there was no street in sight. Not even close. The next street that I would have been able to turn from would have been the first to get to my family's, about 3/4 mile down. But when I turned onto the main drag the night before, the weird building was immediately on my right. This has always been such an insane memory of mine, and I know whoever I tell it to thinks I must have just missed the street somehow, but I went through every possibility, and it just wasn't there. That on top of it taking me a significantly shorter amount of time to get home from that girl's house, especially after panicking and going down random dead ends, adding 5 to 10 minutes. Plus getting home in that amount of time through a neighborhood when before I had to take the freeway to get to her house. And the inexplicable knowing that I was going to be alright, and the literal next turn putting me on the literal only landmark I know in that area. I literally feel like I was transported. I bought a strange mirror. About 3 months ago I was in the market for a large mirror, but I didn't want to spend $80 to $150 on a new one, so I began a hunt for one in thrift stores. It took me about a month of searching when I decided to stop looking and break down and buy a brand new one, but I needed to wait until I got my paycheck. I felt pretty defeated because I can usually find some great finds in thrift stores around me. I even checked a thrift mall I have near me for nothing. I was a little upset, so to cheer myself up, I went to a couple of vintage shops. I love old photos, so I frequently go to the vintage shops. We have 2 in the area close to the thrift mall, so I went to those. The first one I got some great finds and left for the second, and almost as soon as I walked in, a big mirror hanging in the back caught my attention. I was overcome with joy to see such a beautiful mirror. I ran straight back to it to check the price. Unfortunately, it had been painted. The woman that owns the shop said a female had bought it previously and brought it back after it had been painted because she didn't want it anymore. This should have been a red flag. But nevertheless, I bought the mirror for an amazing price of $25. The mirror is from the floor to the top of my hip. I'm 5 feet 7 inches. It was exactly what I wanted, other than having been painted. This mirror, I would say, weighs about 40/50ths of a pound, and the frame is wood. When I first brought it home, I was eager to get it hung up and decide later if I liked the paint or if I wanted to sand it off or paint it a different color. The frame is painted purple. I hung it in my bedroom, and I planned on getting a desk and turning it into like a vanity. Only a few days after hanging it in the middle of the night, it came crashing down off the wall. It didn't break. It took a chunk from my wall where the nails were placed. It took 4 dryway screws, and we put it in a very stable part of the wall. Not wanting that to happen again, I decided I should leave it on the floor, so I tucked it next to my TV so I could still use it. Unfortunately again, it kept getting knocked over. I'd say it was getting knocked over 2 or 3 times in a 24-hour period over the course of about 2 weeks. I finally got fed up with it and put it on the wall slightly tucked behind a nightstand so it would stop falling over. At this point I've had the mirror for about a month, and at night I thought I was seeing things in it when I was looking into it, but I have a lot of stuff in my bedroom, so I believed it was my eyes playing tricks on me. About a week goes by, and I'm seeing things in the mirror whenever I walk into my room. When I'm using the mirror to do my makeup or remove it or just admiring the mirror, I see things out of the corner of my eye behind me. I thought it was a little weird, but I've been having paranormal experiences more and more as I've gotten older. I was thinking it was something new a spirit could use to show me it was around, but the longer I have this mirror, the more I believe that's not the case. Almost 2 months after having the mirror in my room, I realized a spike in activity in my home surrounding the mirror. Whenever I was around it, I would see things by it like orbs. At night, sometimes I can see a shadowy figure next to the mirror. When I use the mirror, I see things behind me, but when I look behind myself, I don't see anything. I wanted some answers, so I went back to the vintage shop I bought it from, and I asked the woman that sold it to me why the previous owner brought it back, and the only thing the lady had told the owner was that it scared her and she didn't want it in her house anymore. The owner gave her her money back, and she left. I asked her if she could give me her name or a phone number so I could get a hold of her and ask her what scared her, but she didn't have any of that information. The only thing that she could tell me was the type of car she was driving and her physical features. I still haven't been able to contact this woman. I've gotten used to seeing things around the mirror at this point, and the more I see it, the more interested I am, so I decided to use my phone to try to catch a voice, EVP. The only thing that came from that was that I got what sounded like humming out of a 2-hour recording session. I've been considering getting a spirit box and a high-quality camera to record the happenings around this mirror. The only scary experience I've had since I brought the mirror into my home was that I've been scratched enough to draw a little blood, and the cut stuck around longer than a normal cut that size would, almost a month for a thin cut. The cut was about 8 inches long on my thigh. I just wanted to get some opinion about what y'all think I should do with it. I really don't want to get rid of it because I love the mirror itself, but the happenings around it are a little weird. Lots of stuff happens in my house, but this is more of a focused experience. I don't hear anything or see things I do unless I'm around the mirror. Female humming, figures behind me when I use the mirror, and shadowy figures at night next to the mirror. So if someone could help me decide what to do, I'd appreciate some suggestions. My grandparents experienced a time glitch in the late 1940s. Both of my grandparents passed away quite a few years ago. But one of the stories that they told me has stuck with me all these years. Grandpa and Grandma were driving through Pennsylvania to an old family farm. The farm belonged to his uncle and cousins who lived there. Grandpa was a city kid and had visited the farm every summer for years as he was growing up. It was around 25 years since he had been, but he loved that farm and wanted to introduce Grandma to his cousins and show her around the farm. As they drove closer to the farm, Grandpa began to tell Grandma about the little town that was on the road on the way to the farm. Soon, they reached the little town. Grandpa was amazed that it hadn't changed a bit. Towards the end of town, they saw that a hotel was on fire. The road was blocked by firemen using an old-fashioned fire wagon with a water tank pulled by horses. They thought it was strange, but they chalked this up to being in rural Pennsylvania. Eventually, the water wagon moved, and they could drive on. They reached the farm, and after greeting Grandpa's uncle and cousins, they shared the news of the fire at the hotel. Grandpa suggested that they all go down to see if they could help. The relatives looked shaken. That's when one of the cousins explained that there was no town, not anymore. About 20 years before, the hotel burned down, and the fire spread to most of the small town's main street. After their businesses were lost, people left the town. In fact, the uncle and cousins were the last people living in the area. Grandpa and Grandma couldn't believe it. They had just seen the town, the fire, and even smelled the smoke. Grandpa, Grandma, and some cousins got in the car and drove back to town, going the same way they came. And the town was gone, just some burned out shells of a few buildings remained. The Nowhere Road. When I was 19, I owned a car. I haven't driven since then because I don't want to experience that ordeal again. I was driving at night, trying to get home from a friend's place. My friend lived out in the country, so I had to take back country roads home. I was never a proficient night driver, so when I got lost, I wasn't surprised. I tried bringing up Google Maps, but I didn't have my 3G coverage out there. I decided that I was probably going in the wrong direction, just a gut feeling, so I got out of the car to look around. At the time, it was May, but when I got out, it was cold as shit. The weather had been mild all that week, even at night it was brisk at the worst. The second I stepped out of the car, though, I knew everything was wrong. Not only was it unimaginably cold for that time of year, but the woods below the hill my car was on were gone. It had been there just moments before I stepped out, but now there were 4 large houses where the patch of trees had been. The houses, though, didn't look like houses I was used to seeing in the area. They had domed roofs with a skylight in the middle and what looked like elongated entryways at the front, kind of like your classic igloo. I started to panic and called my dad, but the call went nowhere. I had forgotten that I lost coverage. Then, I heard a voice below me. I looked down at the houses, and a small floodlight had been turned on in one of the front lawns of the houses. This guy was standing outside with a dog. He was talking to the dog in this language I had never heard before. I'm no linguist, and I couldn't hear him very well, but I swear it sounded practically alien. Lots of elongated vowels and chirping for lack of a better word. I was dumbfounded. Freaking out. At that point, I was considering throwing myself off that hill, hoping to hit my head and wake up back in my car. I was fully awake though, freezing, and panicked. I rushed back into my car and drove for another few minutes before passing by another car. That car, though, was totally not the kind of car we see today. There was a weird symbol on the windshield and lights accenting the chassis. It had no outboard mirrors and didn't make a normal sound as it passed by. I can't even describe the sound it made. Not a whoosh like normal cars, it was almost like a slithering. I think the driver noticed that my car was super different, too, because as I instinctively slowed down to get a better look, so did the strange car. That was it for me. I stopped at the side of the road a few seconds after it had passed and took a lot of deep breaths. I turned off my car and sat for a long time, but eventually worked up the nerve to get out of the car again. This time, it was barely cool out, and I could recognize my surroundings. I was 20 minutes away from home. I walked down the road a ways, around a bend and up another small hill, and could see a familiar billboard out in the distance. The problem was that I was way too afraid that if I got back in my car, things would change again, so I was determined to stay outside. I thought, just to be safe, I'd open the car door and grab the flashlight I keep in the driver's side door compartment. I walked back down the hill, around the bend, and there was no car. It occurred to me that after I shut the car door, I hadn't looked back at all. So maybe I had just forgotten its position. I kept walking back, but nope. No car. I checked my phone, and it had been hours now since I left, and my parents were surely in bed asleep, so I called my friend, and he picked me up on the road. I told him some made-up story about how the car had died on the roads going through the woods, on a different, longer route back to my house. I was getting scared in the woods, so I decided to hoof it home. I gave up by the time my folks had gone to bed, so I had to call him. He laughed at my misfortune and apparent stupidity and said he'd help me look for the car the next day. I led my dad and him on a wild goose chase for that car for the majority of the next day, before my dad gave up and said it must have been stolen and reported it. To this day, the car hasn't been found, because as far as I know, it's on the side of the road in what I firmly believe to be an alternate dimension, a parallel universe, or what have you. The truth is, I have no idea how this sounds. I've only told my wife what happened, and she thought I was messing with her, and then after I insisted I wasn't, she believed I was insulting her intelligence. To smooth things over, I gave in and told her it was just a prank or whatever, and she forgot about it. I'm sorry if this sounds too contrived, I just wanted to give the best account of what happened. Much love. The portal? Do portals really exist? At one point in my life, I didn't even know what a portal was. Now, hell, I think there's one located in my apartment. So pretty much to catch you up to date, the apartment I live in now was originally my mother and stepdad's place. Me and my boyfriend moved in once they bought a house up in Jersey. We have been living in that apartment for almost 3 years now. In my apartment, when you first walk in, there is a closet door in the right corner that I use to keep jackets, coats, and blankets in. So just to be clear, I go in that closet very frequently, almost every day or every other. One day I was pulling out a jacket when I noticed on top of the shelf inside the closet held a gray and black gift bag. I looked in the bag, and inside was a Christmas candle holder with tags still on it and a card that was completely licked and sealed shut. I was so confused knowing I had not put that there, and I didn't think my boyfriend did either. I opened the card, and it said to Bonnie, from Mona. I was beyond baffled because I have never even met a Bonnie nor a Mona in my life. I went over to my boyfriend and asked him if he knew a Bonnie or a Mona. He said no, I don't. Then I showed him the gift in the closet, and he said he had never seen it before. So I figured okay, maybe it was something my mom or stepdad had left behind. When I FaceTimed them, they had never seen it either and didn't know anyone with those names. Then my stepdad proceeds to say, well, that's strange because no one had ever lived there before him. He was the first owner of that apartment, so it couldn't even be from a previous homeowner. So how did it get there? This next thing I found made me think okay, my closet is definitely a portal for gifts because I can't figure out how random things keep appearing inside of there. About 2 months after I found the candle holder with the card, I found something else. This time it was so cool it still baffles me. While grabbing a blanket out of the closet on the top shelf again was a bracelet, but not any bracelet, one that was made entirely out of starburst wrappers with nothing holding it together besides starburst wrappers. My boyfriend once again never saw it before and keeps thinking I'm playing jokes on him, and I even asked the only houseguest I had in 2 months over, and they never noticed it either. So what do you think? Do I have a portal inside my closet, or is there a reasonable answer for my random gifts? I've encountered so many things between evil, spiritual, portals, etc. After a while, I think I'm going crazy. I have a couple of more stories I would love to hear your opinions on between my dreams coming true, which is super crazy sometimes, and I also need some opinions on bizarre encounters that happen to me between seeing things disappear before my eyes and a UFO sighting I will never forget. Maybe someone holds the answer to why all these things happen to me. I used to feel small, but this world, this universe, other dimensions, the galaxy, what lies beyond that? Makes me feel even smaller but at the same time makes me feel a part of something bigger. When I was about 3, my dad took me to the park. Due to his irregular work schedule, he took a nap on a bench, leaving me alone. I climbed into a piece of playground equipment. It's a tube that's shaped like a telephone handset that has an entrance on the bottom, some ladder rungs inside, and an entrance on the top. Anyway, I climbed into the bottom and through the entrance on the top, but instead of climbing out onto the top floor of the playground equipment, I ended up in a small, red room with carpeting. I could still see the entrance to the tube behind me, and I could see the sun and hear the outside world through the tube, but I was in the small room where the upper floor of the equipment should have been. The room was only about 3 feet tall, resembling a vestibule of some sort. There was a small door opposite the tube exit and an intercom speaker to the left of it. It said to me something like, "Okay, we're going to let you in now." The door opened, and I clambered in what appeared to be the living room of a house. There was wainscoting on the walls, blue gingham curtains in front of a bay window, and I could see the blue sky and clouds through the window. Another speaker on the wall told me to play with the toys. There were things like teddy bears and other assorted stuffed animals strewn around. I played with them for a while, then I tried to walk around to figure out where I was. I couldn't find a door, there was only a hallway to what looked to be a living room, but there was no door other than the red one, which I came in through. It didn't open when I tried it. The speaker told me to keep playing. A bit after that, the speaker told me, "It's time to go now," and the door opened back into the red vestibule. I climbed through, back into the playground equipment, back into the world outside. I went and woke my dad up and told him about it, but obviously I couldn't go back into wherever I had been. I still wonder what happened to this day. Maybe I've been living under a rock, but this is the first time I've heard of the term a glitch in the matrix, and I am so glad to have learned about such a term because, up until now, I haven't known how to explain it. This is exactly what my friend and I experienced. My friend, Blair, and I had just finished spending a week visiting our other friend in California, and now we were taking that long drive back to dusty Arizona. We had been driving for hours when Blair suddenly turns to me and announces that she needs to find a place to pull off and use the bathroom, or she swears she's going to piss herself. I had just finished a huge soda, and so I felt like I could definitely go myself. At this point we're traveling on a very barren highway well beyond city limits and no exit signs indicating that nothing so much as a gas station was around. Ever the proper lady, Blair was determined to find some toilet somewhere so that she didn't have to resort to pissing on the side of the road like an animal, her words, not mine. Just as soon as she said that, she makes a hairpin turn onto an exit with no exit sign. The road on this exit wasn't even paved, so I was pretty sure it was just some random trail leading to the desert. But after about a minute or so of driving down this dirt trail, we pulled into a sort of town. I use the word town loosely, and you'll see why in a minute. This town didn't have any paved roads, all were dirt, and it consisted of a few buildings and no houses. There was a building labeled post office, there was a building that looked to be a garage for fixing cars, and a larger building labeled family cafe. The garage had an old, rusty tow truck. It looked to be maybe from the 40s or 50s. The diner had a few old 1950s gas pumps in the front of it, and there were people inside. In the center of these buildings was just an open, dusty area. Blair pulled her car in front of the diner, parking in front of the gas pumps. Her brand new car was a stark contrast to the old gas pumps she had parked in front of. I thought they were cool pumps, so she snapped a picture of me next to them before we both entered the diner. Anyway, as soon as we stepped inside the diner, I seriously felt like I was pulled into one of those creepy horror movies where there is a town full of people who work to lure in weary travelers so that they can all conspire to murder them. I'm talking, like, The Hills Have Eyes kind of shit. There were a few men sitting down at some tables and eating, and there was a woman behind the counter wiping down the diner bar. All of them were dressed in out-of-date clothes. They were the style of clothes I've seen people wearing in pictures of the Dust Bowl. The ones you find in history textbooks. As soon as Blair and I stepped into that diner, all of the people, and I mean all of them, looked up at us in unison. They didn't say a word, and every facial expression was emotionless. All I could manage to say was a reluctant bathroom. Then the woman behind the counter looked at us with her emotionless face for a few seconds longer, although it seemed like minutes. Never taking her eyes off of us, without saying a word, she pointed to her left. Blair and I walked to the bathroom silently and uncomfortable. I should note that while in that diner, I noticed there was a display of postcards for sale. I didn't stop to look at them that closely, but I caught a glimpse of one as I was walking quickly to the bathroom, and I thought I saw a picture of a woman wearing a much older swimsuit style with one of those head coverings that women used to wear when swimming. I don't know if that's a very good explanation, or if you even know what I mean by that, but that's the best I can explain it because I wasn't sticking around the place to browse the merchandise. Anyway, once Blair and I were in the bathroom, we both confirmed to one another that this whole place was surreal, uncomfortable, and that we both wanted to get the hell out of there before we become the unfortunate victims in a teen slasher movie. Once we had finished our bathroom break, we left the diner as fast as possible. As we walked out, the woman behind the counter and the men eating at the tables continued to silently stare, their faces expressionless. As we got into the car and left, I could still feel their eyes staring at us. Thinking of this, even today, makes me skin crawl. About a year later, my husband and I decided to take a weekend trip to Knott's Berry Farms. At this point, I had already told my husband about the creepy town Blair and I happened upon. In fact, I told him about it several times. It's just something I couldn't easily forget. And to be honest, it was so surreal that if Blair was not with me that day, and if we hadn't continued to talk about the experience while driving back home that day, I really may have thought I dreamed it. Anyway, my husband and I were on the way back from our weekend at Knott's Berry, California, and I suddenly had to go to the bathroom. As soon as I had suggested we find a place to go to the bathroom, I realized that we were on a barren highway again, much like that day with Blair, and I got a huge sense of déjà vu. I suddenly had the thought, Wouldn't it be weird if we ended up in that town again? No sooner had I thought that I realized my husband had made a hairpin turn onto an exit with a dirt road. I looked up to see us pulling into the same town. All I could do was point forward. My jaw hung open. When my husband parked in front of the same old gas pumps, I was going to open my mouth to tell him that there was no way I was going back into that creepy diner, but before I could say anything, my husband turned to me and said, "Looks like it's closed." Not only was the diner closed, but the rest of the buildings in the town were closed too. I went up to the diner to peer in the windows, and there were what looked like ages of dust on the windows. Peering through the dust, I could see the display full of the old postcards, and there were thick, dusty cobwebs strewn along the cards and display. This amount of dust and cobwebs was the result of decades of being untouched. There's no way that amount of dust and cobwebs on that display could have been accumulated from the last time I went into that diner, when previously there was no dust at all on that display. Additionally, from what I could tell through the dusty window, the edges of the postcards were yellowed as if they had been decades old. All of the people in that town were gone, the town seemingly abandoned for decades, by the looks of it, yet I had been there only a year or so ago. I still can't explain it until this day, and I don't think I will ever be able to. I've run through so many scenarios in my mind. It's very plausible that people up and just left the town, but how does decades of dust and aging paper just happen in a little over a year? Why the weird, outdated clothes? Why the expressionless, wordless townspeople? Where were all the houses? Did my friend and I glitch and somehow end up in another time period or some other alternate reality? I would appreciate hearing any theories you may have, as I am truly at a loss. Weird glitch in the Matrix hospital experience. This story happened when I was a nursing student doing my clinical rotation in the labor and delivery ward at a local hospital. My class was divided into 2 teams at the time, and the one that I got placed on was the night shift team. Of course, that night had to be so extremely busy that the OB triage suite desperately needed more hands on deck. My instructor sent me down to the triage unit to be able to observe what goes on in the trenches of labor and lend a hand if needed. Pregnant women came through those doors like there was no tomorrow and everyone was in a hassle. It was about 2 in the morning when a mother went into labor, causing chaos to ensue as every licensed individual basically popped in to assist. The mother delivered precipitously, and both she and her baby were transported to a more controlled environment so she could deliver the placenta as well. Lucky me, being the nursing student, I was given the fun task to clean up the room and get it ready for the next patient that may need it. Imagine a room that was just used to deliver that was left in a complete state of disarray. I thought to myself, I'm going to need some help cleaning this up. One of my friends then entered, reminding me that it was time for our lunch. I asked her before we headed out if she would be kind enough to grab some fresh linen from the stock room while I discarded the soiled items. At this point, my friend agreed, and she walked to the supply closet while I had my back turned from the filth. As I turned toward the room to start the sanitation process, I was left in utter disbelief as the room was in pristine condition with fresh sheets and stocked supplies, ready to accommodate the next patient walking through the doors. I just stood there frozen and confused as my friend walked back from the supply room. She immediately looked at me and said, "Are you ducking with me?" as she stared at the basically brand new room. I just turned to her with my eyes wide open. Without any more convincing, she tossed the fresh linens inside the room, and we sprinted to the nurse's station, both pale and out of breath. We told the charge nurse what happened, and she just responded with a stare and smirked. I am aware that night shifts sometimes mess with your mind due to sleep deprivation, but this was an experience that was witnessed by more than one person. This is the weirdest experience ever, and dare I say, I am not becoming a labor and delivery nurse anytime soon. I was teleported. I've been a firefighter for just shy of 10 years. One night a few years ago, we got a call about a power line being down across a road. As a firefighter, we can't do anything about it, that's the power company. We can, however, divert traffic away from it. So we park the truck in front of the ditch, and 2 of our other guys take their personal vehicles up the hill to block traffic. It's nighttime, so we have hazards on and emergency lights on our vehicles. I'm leaned up against one of my buddy's trucks, and I'm signaling to oncoming traffic with a flashlight. When they get to me, I tell them about the line and send them down a road just a little before this stop to get around it. The 2 other guys are on the opposite side of the truck talking, and I'm waving a flashlight at the next vehicle approaching. This is a 3-lane road. I'm in the far left lane, with traffic coming toward me. It's kind of hard to determine speed when the vehicle is coming straight at you with headlights on. I'm flashing the driver, and it wasn't until he was about 10 yards away that I heard his engine accelerating. All I could get out of my mouth was "He isn't stopping." And then I watched the truck slam into my friend's truck from the other side of the road. I have no idea how I got there, all I know is I was seconds away from being hit head on, then I watched the truck hit exactly where I was standing. It turns out it was a kid texting and driving and not paying attention. However, to this day, I have no idea how I moved across 3 lanes within milliseconds and watched a collision that would have had me standing in the epicenter. Something came into my home and sat on my bed. Then I lost time. When I was 38 years old, I lived in a suburb of southeast Melbourne, Australia, Noble Park. Our house was the odd one out. On a street of 70s/80s brick homes, ours was an Alpine-style weatherboard home with a steep roof built in the early 20th century. It was old, cold, and noisy, and you could see the ground through the gaps in the floorboards. We had a big dog who stayed outside until everyone was home and then slept outdoors in a big pen/doghouse at night, mostly in the summer. We also have an indoor cat. The week it happened, I was home alone. Dad was overseas, and Mom and Sis were visiting family. What happened? One night when walking home from work, I rounded the corner and noticed a figure standing on our carport roof, looking through a window into one of 3 upstairs bedrooms. The sun was setting, so all I could see was a dark silhouette. I yelled at it from the top of the driveway, and it was gone. I remember thinking it odd that my dog didn't bark or notice anything. I went inside, checked the house, the dog, the windows and doors, etc., and everything seemed in place. I assumed I had just seen a shadow from a nearby tree at sunset. The following night I walked home from work, and everything seemed normal. I checked all windows and doors, let the dog inside for the evening, and eventually put him and myself to bed. My bedroom was upstairs, down the hall from the room next to the carport roof. Before bed I had a routine of shutting all doors in the house, as they were all squeaky, and the drafts would often blow them closed if left open. This night, I closed all doors, checked locks, turned off all the lights, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night I was awoken by something, not sure what, but when I came to, focused my eyes, and looked around, I saw the hallway light coming in under my door. I thought I turned it off, but perhaps I forgot. Right then, my doorknob started rattling. Like someone was struggling to open the door. I immediately lay back down on my side, facing the wall opposite my bed, and my heart beat, but I try to listen through it and can't hear anything. No breathing, no footsteps, nothing. At this point, I begin to feel pressure around both my feet. The blanket is getting tighter around them, and I realize that something is now sitting on the end of my bed. I look at the clock again, and it's now a little before 3 a.m. I'm frozen, scared, and have no idea what's happening. At some point I have the idea to slowly readjust my position in bed and move my feet a little to see if something moves or happens. So, I do this, but as I slowly readjust my feet, I feel one of them hit something solid. Something is definitely sitting on the end of my bed. I don't know what to do at this point, so I stay still and listen while looking through one eye at the clock in the bedroom wall. The next thing I remember is hearing the first bird starting to chirp before sunrise. I look at the clock, and it's now a little before 6 a.m., and I notice the room is a little brighter. The sun is coming. Shortly after this, I feel the pressure lift from the end of the bed, I hear the bedroom door open, I see the light from the hallway on the wall again, and then the door shuts and the sun starts to rise. I got up shortly after this and checked the whole house. All doors and windows were locked. The dog had slept through the night, and nothing from the house was missing. My cat was stuck in the bathroom overnight. He must have followed me in when I brushed my teeth without my noticing. I'm not sure what happened, but I won't forget that night in Noble Park. Lost time. I am currently 36 years old, but I experienced the following events when I was 19. A quick backstory is that I was and still am a volunteer firefighter in a small West Australian town in the southwest. Apart from the typical volunteer firefighter duties of attending incidents, I also participated in the sports side of the fire brigade. This consisted of both individual and team events, with your team representing the fire brigade you belong to. There were approximately 30 such teams/brigades throughout Western Australia, and we would travel and compete between October and April. We had traveled to Geraldton to compete in the state championships in 1999, and I had, through hard work, won the Champion Fireman Award. I was at the fire brigades after the event celebration, enjoying myself with my team, drinking beer, and socializing, which began around 5 p.m. While I admit I was pretty drunk, I was still traveling well, as there were a shitload of people, and a lot of my time was spent talking to officials, older members, and with friends catching up, so I had not really gotten my drink on yet. I needed to take a piss, so I just went around the corner and started to piss in the garden like I had a few times already, the same being for every other guy at the party when I got a phone call from an unknown number. Being away from the noise, I answered it, and I remember the guy asking for someone I didn't know and ending the call after perhaps 10 or 15 seconds of sorry wrong number. I finished my piss and then went straight back to the party. When I returned, I was absolutely in shock. Everyone had disappeared, it was dead quiet, every table and chair was neatly stacked, all the rubbish cleared, the lights were off and doors locked, there were no cars, and it was just dead still with not a sound. It appeared across the town. I was ducking confused. I took my phone out, and it was just after 4 a.m. What the duck happened? I checked through it, and my phone showed literally dozens of missed calls and 30 or 40 text messages of people searching for me and looking for me. I called my mate and made it back to my hotel, and over the next few days I confirmed with many people that I had been standing in a circle and excused myself to take a piss after I received a phone call, and that was the last anyone saw of me that night. Where I pissed was where everyone was pissing, so it is impossible that I could have been there unnoticed, and a group of friends searched around for me, but I was gone. I still don't know the explanation and am still as confused as duck. A couple of weeks ago, my dog Coda came into my room and started to try to jump on my bed. Which she was successful in doing after a couple of tries, and I gave her a little nudge too, get off my bed. She jumped down and left. Then I heard my phone downstairs, so I walked down and got a call from my grandma, who said she had made some food. So I said okay, I will stop by and come eat. I get my jacket on and get ready to leave. I get my keys and grab my dog leash to take her. We got in the car and drove for about 10 minutes, then arrived. I was eating and talking to my grandma and things. But when I was getting ready to leave, I couldn't find Coda. I searched everywhere in the backyard and the front outside, nowhere to be found. After a good hour of searching my grandma's neighborhood, it started to get dark. It was about 9:30ish, so I decided to come back and check. The next day I left and went to sleep. The next morning I woke up because I heard something downstairs. To my surprise, it was my dog, and at that point I thought, wait, what? Later, I came back to my grandma to tell her I found my dog. As soon as I arrived, I told. After I told her about how Coda was home, I thought to myself, did I even bring her? I asked my grandma, and she said yes. I did because I left the leash in her living room. I then asked my grandma to watch her footage on her cameras from last night, and there was no footage of the Coda in the street or leaving the front door. But there was footage of her entering the house with me. I went home later, Coda was still there, and till this day I still don't know what happened. My childhood home is a paranormal portal. My family moved into a freshly built house when I was 7 and my sister was 2. It was the first house to be built in the entire neighborhood and apparently one of the only houses with a basement. We have had countless paranormal experiences that have taken place over the years in that house, but none of them have ever been the same. I've always thought that maybe the house is a kind of in-between place where energy moves through to get to its next location. There is also a stream nearby, which solidifies my theory as water is a conduit for energy. Below, I'll go into details on the many encounters that we have had while living there. I hope you enjoy. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. 1. There was a brief period in my childhood where my sister and I shared a bedroom. In our shared room, we had bunk beds. I chose the bottom bunk, and she took the top. We were the kind of kids who liked to fall asleep with the TV on for background noise and light. I remember waking up one night to the sound of the Thundercats theme song. When I opened my eyes, I realized how close I was to the underside of the bunk. My nose was practically touching it. I feel a strange sensation of floating while the Thundercats theme continues to play, and then bam! I'm falling. I feel the force of my body hitting the mattress and actually jostle the bed from the impact. I lay there stunned. Was I levitating? Was it astral projection? Was it a dream? I'll never know for sure, but I will always remember how very real it felt. 2. A few years later I was drying my hair after a shower with my head flipped upside down to get the under parts. When I flipped my head up, there was a little girl standing in front of me with long, dark hair and a white dress, very Samara-esque. I gasped, practically jumping out of my skin. Just like that, though, she was gone. It was straightforward to write it off as a fluke. Maybe the blood all ran to my head, and when I flipped my head up, it created some strange reaction to my vision. But she was just so clear to me. I shook it off and did my best to forget about it until a couple of weeks later, when I saw the same girl walk into my room and through the wall to the outside. 3. One day while sitting on the couch, my sister and I watched as a plain figurine lifted off of its perch and glided smoothly down to the floor of our living room. 4. Once we got our own rooms, my little sister swore that she was being visited by a red lady at night. She claimed that the lady never did anything bad or harmful, it was just unsettling. I don't know if ghosts or guardian angels have auras, but if they do, maybe they take on that color when they present themselves? The fact that she was red made my parents nervous, but my sister insisted that she was harmless, if not a tad bit frightening. 5. I only had one truly negative encounter in the house with a completely different spirit who thankfully never showed up again. I was sitting alone in my room watching TV. At the time my bed was situated basically right up against a window long ways because I enjoyed looking at the moon when it was time for bed. So I'm there with the window shades open to my left when I hear a voice, clear as day, come from the window saying, "You better go find your mommy." Like I said, the shades were open. I could see outside, and there was clearly no one there. Just a horrible, menacing voice that sent chills up and down my spine. I did what it said and hightailed it the duck out of there to find my mommy. After that night, I made a point to always say something to the effect of, "Hello there. I just want to say that I respect you being here. I acknowledge that you are here, and I will never try to cast you out. All I ask is that you don't try to scare me on purpose so that we can coexist peacefully." I would say it like a prayer, and it actually worked. I've made it a practice whenever I start to feel the creepies coming on wherever I am, and it hasn't failed me yet. Luckily, throughout all of this, my parents didn't write us off since they had both grown up in haunted houses as kids. But they hadn't experienced anything out of the ordinary until just this year, 2020. My dad swore that he saw legs with striped tube socks walking across the hallway and into the bathroom. Yes, that same bathroom that I had my encounter in. My mom believes in all of it but purposefully closes herself off from the paranormal because she doesn't want to see it. She saw enough as a child and has no desire to feel frightened in her own home. My family has lived there for about 20 years, and nothing has ever harmed us. It just spooked us. Truck stops are either haunted or portals to hell. I worked in the truck stop industry for about 15 years. All of the following stories took place at the same location. I worked there less than 18 months. If people are interested, I have other stories at other locations, but this one had the most frequent occurrence of weird stuff that happened. I was given the opportunity to help open this brand new location, and since it came with a fat raise and a promotion, I definitely accepted. It has now been about 5 years since the location opened. I don't believe there is a single employee left that was there when we opened of the over 60 employees we hired prior to opening day. On opening day, not long after the ribbon cutting ceremony, a woman delivering flowers dropped the flowers on her sandaled foot and sliced her foot open, bleeding all over the entrance. Within a week of being open, we had water and sewage coming up through all the drains, including sewage ones outside all over the property. It had not been raining, it wasn't like a flood situation weather-wise, we have no idea what caused it to suddenly happen. Almost as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Plumbers were baffled. A couple of months after we opened, we faced a severe storm that destroyed the high-rise interstate sign and caused a 7-hour power outage. I had sent several people home. But I had kept a couple of employees in case the power came back. As we sat in the restaurant dining room, chatting under an electric lantern light, an employee who was a local resident and had lived in the town all of her life mentioned that people were a little worried when this place was announced to be built because this property had been rumored to be a Native American burial ground for years. I have zero way to prove or disprove if that is accurate, but given the events getting more serious as time went on, it makes you wonder. When the power did come back, despite several steps I took, like unplugging all the equipment to make sure the surge wouldn't fry stuff, we lost several pieces of expensive equipment. Some of this equipment was critical and caused major operational problems for weeks until it could be replaced. The first winter after we opened was the coldest in years. So cold that we had to buy space heaters for the servers in the electrical room so the servers wouldn't freeze. We had issues with frozen pipes, especially in the truck care center and the restaurant. 6 months after opening was the first death. A truck driver came in to shower in one of the shower rooms, and we had sensors on the doors that let us know how long someone had been in there. If the timer had been going for a couple hours, we would knock on the door to see if maybe they had actually left so we could clean it for the next driver. The employee knocked on the door of a shower that had been in use for a couple hours, and there wasn't an answer. She used the key to open the door, and the driver was on the floor. He had died of a stroke. He had been driving a semi-truck for 30 minutes before he entered that room. The employee who had opened the door was significantly traumatized. The company did a great job of offering support for her, but she didn't last much longer after that. A few weeks later, it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I was working on the restaurant side of the truck stop as the restaurant manager had quit after a series of bad things that happened to her, and they asked me to move me into the role temporarily. The assistant manager on the store side came over because the freakiest thing had just happened. She pulls me into the store side office and pulls up the cameras to show me what happened. A small 4-door sedan pulls into the lot but doesn't pull into the gas station side, it pulls into the truck stop side where the semi-trucks pull in. He parks next to the maintenance shed, which is located adjacent to the main building and very close to a large trash compactor. He gets out of the vehicle, opens one of the doors, and pulls out a trash bag. He throws the trash bag on top of the compactor. He then gets in his car and leaves the property. I don't remember exactly how long, as she had fast-forwarded the footage, but I think it was an hour or two later he returned. He pulls back next to the compactor, climbs on top of the compactor and chucks the bag onto the roof of the maintenance shed. He then climbs down off of the compactor, gets in his car, and leaves never to return. This is when he was noticed by an employee who had been outside gathering trash to take to the compactor. The maintenance shed is more of a small building/garage. It's about 20x20. If the employee had not seen him throw it up there, it probably wouldn't have been noticed, maybe ever, as the building was as high as a 1-story building. Once the employee saw the individual leave, he went into the shed, got a ladder, and went to get the bag on top of the roof of the shed. He brought the bag inside the store to show the assistant manager. Inside the bag is a ton of paper. These documents list hundreds or thousands of addresses across the United States. Under each address is a specific hidden location on the property where a body could be found. No information on who the individuals were. Just sex and location of the individuals on these properties. The locations span from coast to coast, but I didn't get a chance to look too deeply into them. I was really freaked out, and I thought that touching them would maybe contaminate something, so we just put what we had pulled out back in the bag. The obvious answer here was to call the police, so that is what happened next. Now the thing about truck stops is that they are more often than not in remote locations along interstates for obvious reasons. The town this truck stop is located in has 3 police officers total. It is a town with less than 1,000 people. So, when I say the chief of police showed up, it's because he was the highest ranking officer of 3 in the town. He hated us as truck stops bring crime, and suddenly he had a lot more work to do. He comes in, watches the footage, and looks in the bag. And the most frustrating thing here is that he was not concerned in the slightest. He asked what we wanted him to do about it, it was probably a prank, etc. He took the items with him, filled out a form for a request for the footage, and left. My hope here is that he at least forwarded this to the FBI. A couple of weeks after this, there was a body found of a bound, nude, and recently deceased man across the street at a dump. Because it was a dump, they had no idea where the individual had originated from. Sometime in the following weeks was the second death on the property. It was a driver that had died in his truck. Somewhere in the middle of this, we had another severe storm, and the interstate high-rise was destroyed again. We had another weird incident involving abandoned things. But this one had a resolution. A driver came in to show us that someone had left ratchet straps and small children's clothing folded up neatly next to a diesel pump. The combination of the items was alarming for me, so I got on the camera system and called the police. I was able to find the truck that left the items, and luckily I got the one amazing police officer in the town this time. She actually did her job and followed up with me to let me know that she had found the driver and called him. He had his kid in the truck for a while for summer break, but it had ended, so he had brought her home with her mom and wasn't going to see his kid for a while, so when cleaning out his truck, he had this clothing and some straps he didn't need and thought someone else could use the items. He didn't think about the combination of the two raising eyebrows, and he honestly was really grateful that somebody would be worried and follow up in case. A couple months after the first-year mark, the state DOT had to shut down the off/on ramp to the interstate exit, which started to collapse, and they were worried that the overpass would collapse as well. We had nearly no business for weeks as construction crews rebuilt the ramps and repaired the overpass. It was during this time that I earned a promotion to a general manager role and was moved to a different location. I kept in touch for a while, especially with my former boss and the assistant manager. The incidences continued. A couple months after I left, there were 2 major incidents, but I cannot remember which came first. One involved an individual that entered the building with a machete. He was aggressive. The employees were terrified. I wish I hadn't deleted it, but there is footage of state troopers coming in with AKs and dropkicking the guy. Unsure where this person came from as he walked, and this location was 10 to 15 miles from the nearest town. The second was a customer who attacked a teenage cashier because he didn't get the customer's lotto ticket correct and got into a brawl with the maintenance guy who came to the kid's defense. Slowly, over time, I lost touch with them, and they both left the location, so I stopped getting the stories. I don't know if they are continuing. Haunted? Portal to hell? I don't know, but what I do know is now I avoid truck stops like the plague. I took a hike in the woods, it tried to take me away from reality. It was 9:28, the car was parked, the backpack stuffed with the essentials, and I was ready. I was 30 minutes into the hike when my mother called me. "Yellow," I said. "Hey sweetheart, how are things going with that trait?" "So far, everything is going well, I haven't yet located a place to sleep." "Well, good luck with that. Also be safe, I don't know why you decided to camp there, but just be safe, okay?" "Don't worry, Ma, I'll be safe, okay?" "Okay, then, bye, Ray, I love you." "I love you too, Ma." I walked, and walked more. Passing by trees that were bigger than buildings. Bushes are home to exotic bugs with unnatural colors. Rivers containing salamanders with 3 legs. I watched birds fly through the forest and in the sky. It was beautiful, I felt great even. However, despite all of these nice views, I still couldn't find a place to build my tent. If anything, it was odd. The trees were all evenly spaced out, there was no movement on the path. It just went straight on. A path should at least have some bumps in it, but this one didn't even have a stick to step on. And the sun should be at its peak by now. But it's still at the same spot when I entered the forest. That was concerning. Eventually found this one part of the path. It branches from the road I was taking. Unlike this one, it actually looks like a path for hiking. Messy and muddy. Yet I found myself just standing, my body was giving me goosebumps. I didn't know whether I should continue walking or follow this new path. And yet my legs decided for me, walking down this uncharted path. I came upon this sign that read "Keep Out," which my body ignored and closed the gate. My body walked and walked more, not knowing when to take a break. And there, right in front of me, a flower. It was thicker than the others around it, gray to the bone with red faded towards the end of the petals. My body gets to an even level with the flower, my eyes staring into the center of the flower. There was a tiny ball at the center with a straight line in the center. The gray parts of the stem almost looked like exposed muscle. Pulsing and moving like a muscle too. I reached for the flower, the tiny ball opened. And I watched me as I fumbled on the ground. The flower was now glowing, and the muscles it had for a stem were now fully shaking. Its one eye, like a cyclops, just stared at me. It didn't blink, it didn't move, it just stared. Standing there, with the time around us stopping. The earth around it was now shaken, and the flower grew taller and taller. A shoulder is now exposed for me to see. Its body being made out of a plant-like material with very little real muscle. A arm burst through the dirt, it shoved itself out of the earth enough for the other arm to come out. That was my sign to get out. My body ran and ran, the sound of the creature echoed through the forest. I pushed through bushes and piles of leaves, weaving past tree after tree. Any time the monster sounds fade, they will appear again in a different direction. The more I ran, the more the environment started to change as well. The trees gradually stretched into the sky, almost looking paint-like. The branches at the end of hands all reaching out. Every single one looks to be reaching for something impossible, something bigger than themselves. And the sky, that red-soaked sky, went past the horizon line and beyond. And all of the smaller plant life now melting into the ground looked like pieces of flesh now merged into the skin like ground. Wherever I was, it was not the place where I began. I hid behind a tree, just trying to catch my breath. The flower thing looked behind any tree it could see. It was slowly coming to the patch of trees I was hiding in. My heartbeats are growing faster and louder. Sweating was sliding down my face. Visible shaking in my hands. I felt so lost, so alone. I just wanted to be alone with Mother Nature, but now I was alone with that thing. Call me weak, call me stupid for this, but I cried. I dragged my body down against the tree and cried. That thing cries echoing throughout this hell, and I broke down. My neck was feeling tingling, my vision was blurry, and I was curling up into a ball. At the time, it felt so lost. What the hell was I supposed to do with that thing? And it's one eye looking for me. The silence of everything now surrounds the entire area of this place. With the sound of a little bird singing cutting through that hellish silence. I couldn't tell you why, even if you pointed a gun at me, but I just ran. I followed the sounds of the little bird. I thought at least if I was going to die, I would at least see something beautiful. The beast saw and chased me, its cries sound like they came from the deepest pits of the human brain. I gave it all of my might and sprint. If I were going down, I'd do it while giving all that my body had to offer. Finally, ducking in fine, I found the source of the bird's singing. It was coming out of a circle attached to a tree. It had something covering it, but it was clear enough to see what was through it. It was a forest, but it was covered in green, healthy trees and singing birds. With all that my body had left, I dashed toward the gate, threw myself into the circle, and burst through the other side. Oh, the fresh, clean air. The trees were all randomly placed, with beautiful shades of brown. And the birds, oh, how lovely are their singing. But I quickly remembered where I just came from. I looked behind me to see if the beast followed me. And it didn't. Hell, it wasn't even there. It was gone, nowhere to be seen. However, something was there. It took me a while, but it was there. It was a huge creature in the distance. It towered over the trees and beyond. Its body parts so impossible to describe, so void of detail I couldn't understand. It gave a bloodthirsty cry that would make a skinwalker tremble in fear. The portal that saved me was now closing. The last thing I ever saw of that place was the giant entity taller than a mountain. I'm in my car as I'm typing this. My mom called me, but I didn't respond. I just sent her a text that I'm okay. Still trying to wrap my head around what just happened. Hell, I almost died, and that place. My body shivers, but my mind is telling me to go back. My heart is hoping that never happens. That flower beast, how something so small can turn into that is beyond me. How was my father in two places at once? First off, a little backstory on my dad. The man has so much character and color about him. Though he is mostly a chilled out grandpa at this point whose biggest offenses are the likes of placing a box of dead kittens in the topic hat when the family plays charades at the Christmas Eve get-together. When I was a kid he was a crazy person. He was an amazing father, honest to a fault, and had character made of stone. He apologized when he felt he was wrong, and he would sit and cry with you when things were eating away at your self-esteem. However, as much as I owe him my morality and compassion towards others, I also owe him my extremely demented and nothing is sacred sense of humor. The man got more joy from life in tormenting his children than anything else. We lived on my grandmother's farm in rural Tennessee, and when the power would go out, which happened a lot in our area, he would dare me to run to the mailbox and then lock me outside, at 10 o'clock at night, when I'm about 10 years old, and he would laugh so hard I could hear him over my screams while I banged on the door from the outside, pleading to be let back in. He was the type of dad to wake you up in the morning by revving a chainsaw, change the clocks in the house to make you get ready for school at 2 a.m., and stand on the front porch in his tighties while you were getting on the bus in the morning and yell, "I love you. I'm gonna miss you so bad." In a voice that could only imply that he was suffering from severe brain damage. In other words, he was always looking for a way to scare you, embarrass you, or just make you have such a crazy, unexpected experience that you would be guaranteed to remember him forever. And it worked. I love that man. Now, that was needed for context, and this story takes place in my second to last year on my grandmother's farm. I was 17 and had been working a job in my small town, stocking beer coolers and mopping floors at the local gas station. I was driving home from work in my little truck at about 10 p.m., and as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights showed up the hill to my grandmother's house and panned down the hill to the edge of our single-wide mobile home. I stopped immediately. All four tires in the driveway, pointing straight to the end of that straight stretch of gravel. I could see my dad. His old flatbed truck and my stepmother's minivan were parked pointing to the left, at the base of our trailer. He was standing behind them, with his back to my headlights. Our chocolate lab, Cassie, sat at his feet, staring intently at him, paying no attention to the vehicle entering her territory, which was highly unlike her. I only stopped because it was so late and unusual for my dad to be outside at this time. It was in the middle of the week. He was usually passed out in his recliner wearing nothing but his underwear, with the History Channel quietly rambling on about the Civil War by this time. I slowly proceeded down the drive. Our driveway was about half a football field in length, and as I drove slowly toward the bottom of the drive, my dad began to walk, still with his back turned to me, and step behind the vehicles, the height of my stepmother's van fully concealing him. It took another 15 seconds from that point for me to reach the end of the drive, and I pulled my truck in on the side of his flatbed, leaving me closest to the road. I grabbed my big gulp and got out of the truck. "Dad?" No response. "Dad?" Still nothing. Immediately I got a bit creeped out. But then I thought to myself nearly as quick. This dude is trying to scare me again. He must think I didn't see him. I got down on my knee and peered under the vehicles. His left boot. Unmistakable. Cassie's back legs and butt right beside him, tail tucked between her legs. I hollered out. "You're doing a crappy job of hiding, Dad. I can see your boot sticking out from behind the tire on the van." I watched as his left boot slowly slid to the right until it was concealed behind the tire with the other. Still no response. I called for the dog. "Cassie." She turned and literally scurried beneath the vehicles to get to me as if she were under heavy gunfire. She was whimpering when she got to me and acting very strange, as if she were terrified. She was acting how I would imagine a dog would act if they were constantly beat on, and I had never seen her behave that way before. When she got to me and I placed my hand on her, you could almost hear her breathe a sigh of relief. She was sticking to my legs like glue, and as I was still down on one knee and a bit off balance, she nearly knocked me over. I petted her for a moment and tried to comfort her, but she seemed like she was afraid of something. With her tail still tucked between her legs, she pushed herself in between mine as I stood up. It was after seeing how timid and odd Cassie was acting that I decided that I may be misreading the situation and I might need to get into the house. My dad was surely a prankster, but when he was caught, he was caught. He never drugged things out once we caught on. He would come out and say something like, "I guess you kids aren't as gullible as you used to be. I'm going to have to start stepping it up a notch." Dad didn't drink much and never got drunk really, but I couldn't think of what the root of this odd behavior could possibly be, and it really started to weird me out. I made one last attempt at communication. "Dad. I know you're there. I saw you when I pulled in the driveway. The gig is up. What are you doing out here?" No response. I started around the front of my truck to round the vehicles and walk over to him. Cassie began to panic and whimper loudly, still glued to the inside of my ankles, crouched on the gravel with her head darting back and forth wildly. I stopped in front of my truck. I stand there for another moment in silence, waiting for something but not sure what, and then announce, "Valp, I'm heading in. See you in a bit, weirdo." I turn to walk to the front porch, unconsciously building speed as I hit the first step. Cassie drops back and doesn't follow me onto the porch but seems to sort of stand guard at the foot of the steps. Keys in hand, I'm already searching for the deadbolt key. Panic is building in my chest, but I'm not sure why. I hurriedly unlock the door and jump into the house, swing around, and slam the door behind me, locking the deadbolt all in one fluid motion. From behind me, I hear a voice yell, "What the hell?" I spin around. My big gulp drops to the floor and explodes across the living room floor. There sits my dad. In his underwear. Sitting up from a deep sleep in his recliner. I begin to hyperventilate and yell through gasps of air that there is a man in the driveway hiding behind the van. "I thought he was you. I was talking to him, Dad." I nearly collapsed on the floor. Within 15 seconds, my dad is running out the back door of the house with a spotlight and a handgun, still wearing nothing but his underwear. He was outside for what felt like forever. When he came in, he was pale as a sheet. He said someone was definitely out there, but he couldn't see them. He could hear them running, but when he pointed the spotlight in the direction of the footsteps, there was no one there. Crazy thing is, our trailer sat at the front of a 150-acre cornfield, and it was off-season, so everything was tilled down to the dirt. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. It was a terrifying experience, and I know it's one that seems straightforward to explain. My brain really wants to tell me that I had just foiled a car thief or something, or maybe even stopped a possible home invasion. The thing is though, my dad has an unmistakable posture and an even more unmistakable walk. I know those were his boots I saw under the van. I also know that if he had somehow set all this up, I would have heard about it for years because it would have been one of his favorite stories to tell, how he scared me so bad when I was 17, and how funny it would have been. He does tell people about this from time to time, but he always ends with the same detail. It wasn't until he was outside running around in his underwear with a handgun that I realized that Cassie had been sleeping on the floor next to his recliner when I ran in the door. My name is Sam, and I'm a 33-year-old man living alone in central Michigan. I live in a very small town of about 800 people, and there's pretty much nothing but forests surrounding my town. The nearest town is 37 miles away, and that town has roughly 3,000 people, so this part of Michigan is fairly remote. I live about 8 miles north of my small town, and my property is butted up to about 14,000 acres of state land. Normally I love this about my land, but after last night, I'm terrified of the woods behind my house. A couple nights a week I like to walk through the woods directly behind my house and sort of unwind and be at peace with nature. I know walking through the woods at night is probably not the best idea, but I always have my handgun with me, and I carry a flashlight to see. I know these woods like the back of my hand, so I'm pretty comfortable out there day and night. Last night, however, I walked further than I normally do, and I deeply regret it. At around 10 p.m. I bundled up in my overalls and boots, grabbed my flashlight and gun, and made my way out the back door. It was around 18 degrees Fahrenheit, so not too cold for this time of year. I made my way into the start of the forest and took a deep breath of the crisp, fresh air. I could hear coyotes yipping in the distance, and a slight smile formed on my face. Maybe I'll get to see a couple coyotes tonight, I thought to myself excitedly. Coyotes aren't really big enough to be a real threat to adult humans, so I never really mind when they're nearby. Besides, I got my gun in the rare case they get aggressive. One shot to the air will send them scampering away deeper into the forest. I walked in silence for 10 minutes or so, listening to the sound of my boots crunching in the snow. I could tell I was getting closer to the coyotes because they were getting louder and louder. As I was focusing on them communicating with each other, I thought I heard a voice in the mixture of their barking and yipping. I stopped walking and listened closer. After a few seconds, I heard it again, only this time I could make out a couple of words. "Help me, mister," the voice shouted. I thought it was a little strange the voice didn't sound in distress, but I believed they might be in shock or something. I took off running to where I heard the voice coming from and ran for about 5 minutes before stopping. "Where are you?" I shouted into the night. I listened but didn't hear a thing. It was then that I noticed just how quiet the forest had gotten. No more coyotes yipping or anything, just dead silence. I feared that the man was injured and was unable to talk to me. I started speed walking to where I thought I had heard the voice. I walked for a solid 15 minutes before needing to stop and rest. I was much further than I normally go on my night walks but still wasn't concerned. I could just follow my footprints back home, so I decided to yell out one more time before heading back and calling the authorities to report a person in need of help. "Hello? Are you out here?" My voice echoed throughout the quiet forest. I strained to listen for any type of noise indicating where the person might be, but it was deathly silent. "I'm going to go call for help," I shouted before turning around to leave. As soon as I turned around, I froze, my blood instantly freezing in my veins. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and my heart began to race wildly. Just as I turned around and pointed my flashlight back to the way I came from, I saw a man's head quickly tucked behind a tree, only his head was roughly 8 feet up the tree. Whoever this was, they were extremely tall. "Who's there?" I shouted, fear present in my voice. There was no answer. I decided to try and cut to the left to avoid walking by the tree I saw him and to try and circle around to my tracks to get back home as quick as I could. I kept my flashlight pointed directly in front of me with my free hand on my gun, just in case I needed to defend myself. The level of fear I was experiencing made me feel like this was no man, but something I was never supposed to see. "Help me, mister." The same voice from earlier came from about 40 feet behind me. I spun around and pointed my flashlight where I heard the voice and nearly shit my pants right there. Head was poking out from behind a tree at about the same height as before, only he was much closer. So close that I could see he was grinning ear to ear. His face looked incredibly pale and long, inhumanly long. I took off in a dead sprint in the direction I knew my house was. Laughter rang out behind me as well as the occasional "Help me, mister." I didn't turn around once, I just ran faster than I've ever run in my life, and eventually the laughter faded as he fell further behind. Once I reached my normal walking trail, the tall man's voice faded out completely. I still didn't slow down, I ran full blast until I burst out of the tree line and practically fell into my backyard. I didn't stop catching my breath until I was safe in my house with the doors and windows locked. I slumped into my chair and panted heavily as I clutched my handgun tightly. I didn't sleep at all last night and fell asleep around 7 this morning. I woke up a few hours ago and thanked the Lord. I had the next few days off. I don't think I could have gone into work after my experience. I am a 25-year-old male, and this incident occurred when I was approximately 13 years old. Yes, it's been a long time since it happened, but my family and I still talk about it to this day, as it involved all of us. And while we still talk about it, I unfortunately have a hard time remembering the exact dates and some parts of it due to some head trauma. So that means some of the finer details I cannot remember at this moment. But I know this happened sometime during 2012. I think it happened on our way from Washington to Oklahoma. We had made this trip several times, but I cannot remember if it was on our way to Washington or from Washington that year. But basically, we had been on the road all day, it was night, the sun had already set, and everyone was tired. We had 2 cars to fit everything. Me, my sister, and my mom rode in the SUV, while my brother and his girlfriend at the time, now wife, rode in the small 4-door car. We had been on a long stretch and his girlfriend was already asleep, so she couldn't drive. My mom agreed that she may be too tired for once and needed to pull over to find a hotel in this town. He said all right, and he slowed to get behind us so he could follow us and pull over. At this point everything seemed fine, and nothing was out of the ordinary. It wasn't until we passed the sign with the name of the town on it that my gut twisted. I remember watching as we neared the town, and there was just an inkling of a feeling that I didn't understand yet. Everything seemed fine, but I kept watching my surroundings as we drove. The lights had a sickly yellow or orange hue to them. I remember looking at the sign as we passed, but I can't remember the name of the town, and the funny thing? No one can. No one has been able to, yet we wrote it down that night and the day after, so we don't come through it again. Anyways, we pass the sign, and my gut just drops. At the time, I didn't understand what I was feeling, anxiety. I just remember thinking we're being watched. But looking around, there was no one. While yes, it was the middle of the night, so people were probably asleep. There were no cars, buildings were empty, and the air itself was stagnant as we drove through it. Now I know kid me had a very active imagination, but my older brother can confirm the town was empty in a way it scared even him. We saw a church sitting on a small hill just to the right side of the town, and we drove up to it. We parked near the door as it was the only light in the gravel parking lot. Also, this was the only light that was white and didn't have a sick hue to it. We all stepped out of the cars to stretch our legs and find a hotel. My mom told me and my sister, who was about 9 to 10 at the time, to stay close, slipping in the fact that she has this creepy feeling as well. At first, I dismissed the small statement and just walk around the car to move my legs when something moves behind the big dumpster that's across the parking lot. The light on the door didn't reach all the way out to the dumpster. I could barely see its outline enough to know it was a dumpster. But something scattered along the gravel as if darting behind it. My mom hears this and orders me and my sister to get in the car. I stood, staring for a moment before walking backwards to the car. For whatever reason I didn't feel like turning my back on it. We waited in the car as my brother had his girlfriend get in the car and walk my mom to the SUV and help her put the address in for the GPS. Once it was set, he got in the car, and we drove off. I couldn't get myself to look back at the dumpster as we drove off. We drive through the town, and again, everything seems eerily empty and clean. There was no litter, no trash, nothing that suggested life besides the street lights that were on. We head to the edge of the town, following the GPS, and turn onto this gravel road that leads down into a giant open surrounded by dense woods. In said lot was the motel. And I don't mean the fancy hotels and motels now. No, this was a 2-story L-shaped building with about 30 to 40 rooms and the check-in. It was a separate small building just to the side of the hotel rooms. It only had one light in the overarching lot besides the small ones above the doors. This light was a hollow white. We pulled in, and my mom called my brother and said to stay in the car, that she was going to go talk to whoever was inside. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. The building was small, but the windows were big. We could see inside enough to watch our mother go in and talk to the guy at the counter. But here's the thing. Me, my sister, and my brother all saw different things. When our mother went in, I saw her talk to an old man who had a thin, frivolous stature and a permanent scowl. He seemed old and weary and miserable. His eyes were slightly sunken in, his skin slightly pale and hanging slightly. My sister says she saw a young man who seemed nervous and annoyed. Dark hair and deep eyes. My brother says he saw a middle-aged man who was aloof and uncaring. He had a beard and dark hair. I can't remember all the details they gave me, but I knew the main differences. When our mother came out, she got in the car and waved for my brother to follow. We parked in front of our rooms. She had gotten 2 side by side. We were told to only bring in the essentials for the night because she doesn't want to stay any longer than is necessary in the morning. We all agreed and grabbed as little as we needed and headed into our rooms. My sister, my mother, and I stayed in the right room while my brother and his girlfriend stayed in the left. My sister had asked to take a shower, and of course our mother went to help get it ready as my sister wasn't sure how this one worked. Well, it turns out it didn't. The water wouldn't turn on. So she calls my brother and explains, and of course he comes to get her so she can shower in theirs. While they go do that, my mom looks at the beds, realizing I'm staring at them, and she goes, "You don't want to touch them either, do you?" And hearing I wasn't alone in this feeling, I smiled and shook my head. I said it feels gross, and she said it does. She went to check the beds when my brother came running back to our room. He opened the door frantically, and of course it startled us. He said to pack my things and asked my mom to come here. She nodded and followed and began putting stuff back in my bag. My sister came back over, and she looked freaked out. I remember offering to help her pack and asking what happened, and at first she had a hard time trying to say it, but finally got it out that there was blood in the shower when they went in. She freaked out and had Caleb check it, and he came to get our mom. She came back and calmly said to put our things back in the truck and get in. At that point, it really hit how bad this place felt. I began to panic and hurried to put our stuff in the car. We got in, and neither my brother nor my mom wasted time driving away, not even stopping to get a refund for not staying or telling them about the blood. We turned to continue going through the town onto the one we knew about. Unfortunately, my brother needed gas. Luckily, as we get to the edge of the town, like the rest of it is in our rearview mirrors, there was a gas station, but again, no cars, not even an employee's car. My brother pulls to the pump, and my mom oles to the one next to it, so we were all together still. We all jump out and go inside after my brother pumps his gas. At this point we're all awake, so we grab a drink and a snack and pay for gas. That goes fine until we go back outside. We're all heading back to the cars. My brother's girlfriend was in the car already, and I was walking next to him. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we were laughing some to kind of ease the tension. Well, I'm standing next to him as he puts the thing back to the pump, and something moves across the parking lot. Both of our heads shoot up, and we're staring at a shed in the back corner and tall, intimidating trees behind it. All of a sudden, two figures dart and run behind the shed. My brother slowly closes his gas tank without taking his eyes off of the shed, and he says to go get in the car. As soon as he says it, three pairs of glowing yellow amber eyes are staring back at us from beside the shed, yet taller than it. My brother yells for us to get in the car and leave. He books to the front seat of his car as I jump in our truck, and he speeds off, my mom following after him. My mom is asking what happened because she didn't see that part, but luckily my sister had seen it also. We began telling her what happened, and she called my brother. He told her the same thing, and she said that we'll never come through here again. After this, we drove to the next town and found a Holiday Inn and went there. We spent the next hour, I think, just kind of talking about what happened until we were all calm enough to sleep. The next day, I remember us trying to look up the town we had gone through the night before, but we couldn't find anything. We thought maybe it just wasn't a well-known town, so we got older maps and even asked people that worked there about the town a few miles away, and no one knew anything about it. They even said there wasn't a town that way for miles. Since then, it has had us all dumbfounded about it. Now there's no point in trying to find it when we can't remember the name of it, but it's still a deep-rooted enough memory that we all talk about it. It's not often, but it's like something we can't forget, no matter how hard we try.